What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix for Week 7 of the 2021 CFL season. I'm Ryan Coop here with your depth chart update here on Friday for all of the games this week. Yes, Week 7 kicks off tonight with a doubleheader. We've got Calgary and Hamilton, Saskatchewan and Toronto, both going tonight, and then 2 games on Saturday. So we're fortunate enough to have all the depth charts before the first game of the week this time around, and there's some notable changes for some teams this week. So we'll go through them all game by game here and take a look at them and their fantasy impacts. Let's kick things off with the Calgary and Hamilton game that starts off this week. And let's look at Calgary first of all. Bo Levi Mitchell is the quarterback once again with Jake Mayer as the backup. Mitchell had his first start back from injury last week, and he'll get a second one this week again, as expected. Notably for Calgary, Josh Huff listed as a game-time decision. Huff has been one of my top recommended picks at wide receiver for a couple weeks in a row now. He's had three or four great weeks in a row where he put up value for you. I had him in my lineup for this week, but if he's a game-time decision, that could mean you risk putting him in your lineup and then he doesn't play. So I say be cautious on that front. I am probably taking him out of my own lineup this week as of now. Also missing for the Stampeders, Hergy Mayala at wide receiver. He'll be out this week for sure. Colton Hunchak takes a spot starting at slot back. Also notably missing is Nick Hawley at kick return for the Stampeders. He handled a good chunk of the returns the last couple of weeks. I know Josh Huff got in there for a couple as well. So he is not ready to go this week. He is out, I believe, due to injury. So it remains to be seen who handles return duties. Unfortunately, the Stampeders do not mention it on the depth chart. If he is in the game, could Huff get the full return job? Could somebody else handle it this week? I unfortunately do not have that information myself to be able to definitively tell you one way or another who will be handling that role this week. The Stampeders will line up with Bo Levi Mitchell at quarterback, Kadeem Carey as the starter at running back with Ante Milanovic-Litre coming in for likely a couple of plays here and there. Wide receiver Josh Huff, again game time decision. Markeith Ambles, Kamar Jordan, Colton Hunchak, and Richie Sindani are your starters there. Last week, Jordan had the big day. Ambles had 17 targets, but only connected on 5. Expect those two to get a good chunk of the targets for the Stampeders again this week. I would expect that to be no different, especially if Huff is out this week as well. Looking at the Ticats side of things, Dane Evans is on the 4 to 6 game injured list now, so David Watford gets the start this week. He came in for Evans late in that game against Toronto the week before. Jeremiah Mazzoli's listed as the backup, so likely not quite ready to return from his injury, but if they're in a pinch, they could put him in if they absolutely need to. But Watford gets the start. They'll roll with him. And he's not getting too much help back in his lineup. Braylon Addison, DeVere Posey are now eligible to come off the 6-game injured list, but they are both not quite ready to go. Brandon Banks is also out for another week for Hamilton. So Stephen Dunbar Jr., Jalen Acklin, Tim White, Poppy White, and David Unger III are your receivers in Hamilton for another consecutive week. So that's who David Watford will be throwing the ball to. And at running back, notable change here. Sean Thomas Erlington missed a couple days of practice this week with, I believe, a leg injury. So Jackson Bennett gets the start. Thomas Erlington is listed on the depth chart as the 3rd string running back, which to me likely shows that he's very doubtful to actually play in this one. So Jackson Bennett gets the start. He comes in at $3,000 in CFL Fantasy, and if you get that much for a starting running back, on a team where you have a rookie, well, not really a rookie, he's been in the league for a few years, but a quarterback with very few starts, I could see them leaning on a guy like Jackson Bennett a little bit. Not a bad grab for a cheap price point if you're looking to save money at running back. Getting into the second game on Friday, we've got Saskatchewan and Toronto. The Riders will have Cody Fajardo starting at quarterback this week. He left last week's game against the Bombers in concussion protocol, but he appears to be all ready to go. Shaq Evans is still out. He's been on the 6-game injured list. And Jordan Williams-Lambert will be missing his second straight game for the Riders. Offensively, they line up with Fajardo at quarterback, Powell at running back, Keon Schaefer-Baker, Ricardo Lewis, Braden Lenius, Kyron Moore, and Mitchell Picton as your receivers. Jamal Morrow listed as backup running back, and expect him to handle the bulk of the return duties again this week as well. Defensively for the Riders, a couple notable changes. They do get one big piece back in Lucius Purifoy at defensive backfield, who missed last game. But Ed Gainey is still out again this week. And this week they'll be missing Marino on the defensive line is out. He's been a big piece there. And Mike Edom at defensive back is also out this week. And again, still no Ed Gainey, still no AC Leonard, who is still suspended by the league and has been suspended for an additional game, so he will be out next week as well. Looking at the Toronto side of things, the most notable player out from a fantasy perspective is no Daniel Braverman for the second week in a row. He has gotten in as a starter at receiver and handled the return duties in the game he's been in, and has done a very good job as a cheaper value play. He is not able to go again this week, so Chandler Worthy is the guy I expect to be doing the return job for Toronto. He did it last week. He's listed as the backup receiver behind DeVaris Daniels. I would expect Chandler Worthy to get that job again this week. Nick Arbuckle's the starting quarterback. McLeod Bethel Thompson behind him. John White, the starter at running back, with DJ Foster as the backup. I expect them to be used in sort of a dual back system, or at least Foster to be involved in the passing game a little bit like he did last week when he led the team in receiving yards. So they're sticking with that system because it's been working for them. At receiver, DeVaris Daniels is the starter, as I mentioned. Eric Rogers also. Ricky Collins Jr., Curley Gittins Jr., and Dejon Brissett are your starters at receiver for the Argos this week. Defensively, they will be out without linebacker Vontae Diggs, but they do get defensive back Cresdon Butler back, who will be starting for the team at safety. Getting into the Saturday matchups, it starts with Montreal and BC. Let's go to Montreal first. Not too much has changed since their last game 2 weeks ago. Before the bye week, a lot of the lineup is the same. Quan Bray is out for another week at wide receiver, so Dante Absher will take the starting job there in his place. And on the offensive line, they get a little bit of a boost back with Tony Washington slotting back into the starting lineup after being on the one-game injured list last time around. So a nice bit of extra protection there for Vernon Adams Jr., who does slot in as the starting quarterback, coming off of that big game 2 weeks ago where he got Eugene Lewis and Jake Weineke both for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns each. Those two guys will line up at receiver. So will BJ Cunningham, Dante Absher, and Keon Julian Grant. And William Stanback, the running back, with Mario Alford returning kicks again for the Alouettes this week. So again, not much of a change from them. It seemed to work out well last week. They had some inconsistency issues earlier in the season, so let's see which Alouettes team shows up against a BC defense that I think is very underrated and very good in their own right. Speaking of BC, a lot of notable changes and fantasy impact from them this week. At running back, no Shaq Cooper. He is out for this game, so James Butler comes in as the starting running back. He started the first couple games earlier this year when Cooper wasn't quite ready to go. He had a nice solid week number 1 at a $2,500 salary. He had a decent week number 2. So at a cheaper price point, I do kind of like James Butler. Let me just double check on his salary. He comes in at $2,500. So if you want to save some money, you could go with Butler at running back. At wide receiver, no Lamar Durant again, no Dominic Rhymes, who's on the 6-game injured list, and Brian Burnham is listed as a questionable game time decision. Burnham's a guy that, is the leader oftentimes for this BC explosive offense. He'll make the big plays, he'll make the big catches, and usually puts up a pretty solid point total. He is listed as questionable, and it remains to be seen if he will actually play tomorrow. Other than that, you've got Lucky Whitehead, Javon Catoy, Keon Hatcher, and Shaq Johnson. So the same starters as last week at receiver for BC, besides potentially not Burnham if he is not ready to go. I really like Javon Catoy as a pick with no Durant, with no Rhymes still, with Burnham, especially with Burnham being questionable. Last week, Riley tried to find him near the end zone. In the 2 games he's been heavily involved in, he's put up solid fantasy totals and comes in at still a cheaper price point of under $5,000. So I really like Javon Catoy as a fantasy option. And Chris Rainey returning kicks as per usual for the Lions. And Michael Riley, of course, the quarterback. He is listed as questionable on the depth chart, but I think they're listing him there as questionable week in and week out because of all the flack they got in the first couple of weeks when, unless something's changed in practice this week, which it certainly could, if Riley is questionable and not ready to go, you're not leaving him in there until 2 minutes left in a 30-point blowout of the Red Blacks last week. You're just not. Expect Riley to play and be the starter and ready to go for BC. And getting into the final game of the week, the Bombers and the Elks. Looking at the Winnipeg side of things, nothing really notable changing from a fantasy perspective. Naaman Roosevelt still not getting into the lineup for the Bombers. They're rolling with the same offense they have the past couple of weeks. Zach Collaros at quarterback, Andrew Harris at running back, receivers Darvin Adams, Rasheed Bailey, Kenny Lawler, Nick Dembski, and Drew Wolodarski. And I know many like myself are, anxiously waiting to see what Naaman Roosevelt could do in this lineup. But hey, maybe the Bombers are going with a if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality here, and it seems to be working for them. So I expect Roosevelt to get in eventually, especially if somebody gets injured. But in the meantime, the Bombers like what they see from the group they have, and it's been going well for them. So it doesn't surprise me one bit. Charles Nelson will be returning kicks for the Bombers again as per usual. The only notable change for this team is they will have a new kicker kicking field goals for them. Mark Leggio has struggled a lot in recent weeks with the field goal side of things. They will still likely have him punting this week, but Ali Mortada, who was brought in a couple weeks ago, and has supposedly been hitting field goals from 60 yards in practice is his comfort range, I think he said, which is insane. Will be handling field goal duties, so I'm excited to see what he can do for the Bombers. And getting into the Elks, we got the big bombshell this week that Trevor Harris is now on the 6-game injured list. He, I guess, injured himself a little bit in the neck area against Calgary last game, and it just started to get worse and worse in practice this week, and somehow now he's out for 6 weeks, or at least on the 6-game injured list. And so Taylor Cornelius gets the start at quarterbacks for the Elks this week. I believe it's his first CFL start, a guy that came from, spent some time in the XFL, coming over to play the Canadian game here. And he's got a tough matchup facing that Bombers defense that doesn't give up a lot of touchdowns, doesn't give up a ton of points, and he's leading an Elks offense that doesn't put up a ton of touchdowns or points and often results in field goals. So it's a tough matchup for Cornelius facing that Bombers really strong pass rush from Jefferson and Jackson Jeffcoat. But he also, at his disposal, has the leading rusher in the league. James Welder Jr. leads the league in rushing by a decent margin, and I already had him pegged as a really good running back play this week. He's again the leading rusher in the league. He's facing a Bombers defense that seems to be their weak point. You seem to be able to run pretty well against them, and if this young QB needs some pressure taken off of him, leave James Wilder Jr. to carry a bulk of the load, to get a lot of carries, get a lot of those check down dump passes. I expect a big day for Wilder Jr. At wide receiver, They've got Darrell Walker, Greg Ellingson, Shai Ross, Mike Jones, and Ernest Edwards as the starters. Jalen Tolliver and Tavon Smith, who have gotten some looks in there, are listed as backups. And, from the Elks receiver standpoint, I'm a little more cautious to go towards any of them this week now. I had Darrell Walker as a lock in my lineup before because he always performs so well against the Bombers. He averages 24 points a game against them in his last 5 years, which is insane. But now with, the young quarterback, the Bombers are going to bring the heat with a lot of pressure on him. You can expect that, and that makes me a little nervous at some of these higher-priced guys like Walker or Ellingson. If the passing game does truly struggle, you're spending a lot of your salary on one of those guys, so maybe it makes more sense to take one of the cheaper options like an Ernest Edwards, who will also be returning kicks again this week for Edmonton, which the Bombers have given up a decent yardage in the return game. Edwards comes in, I think, around a $2,500 salary, maybe a couple bucks more. That could be a good pick for you this week with the kick returns and the receiving yardage on top of that yet as well. Defensively for the Elks, premium pass rusher Kwaku Boateng will be out this week. And is not in the lineup, but they do get a nice addition at the linebacker position with newly added Derek Moncrief, former Saskatchewan Rough Rider, former NFLer, slotting in at the strong side linebacker. I'm excited to see what he can do in this Elks defense. Those are your notables for every team around their depth chart for this week. Again, a lot of changes, so make sure you adjust your lineup accordingly. And make sure you have guys in there that are actually going to play because that could end up hurting your week, obviously. But that does it for the Week 7 depth chart update, which also means that does it for the Week 7 preview. So best of luck to you in week number 7. I hope you have a great week. I hope you hit that 100-point mark we're trying to all get towards. And hope I see you at the top of the overall leaderboard for this week. That would be awesome. That would be great to see somebody who watches these videos have a fantastic week and lead the way. Do all the YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you liked, what you didn't. If you have any fantasy questions, put them in the comments section or tweet them at me at CooperTrooper42. If you go the tweet route, that's probably more likely to get a faster response from me because I'll see it more easily and quickly. But you can leave them in the comments section. I'll try to get to them when I can as well. And if you want to play CFL Fantasy alongside myself and any other viewers, just go check out the video description and make sure you go click on the link in there to the group I've created, the league I've created, the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix League on the official CFL Fantasy site. You can play alongside myself and other viewers this week and every week throughout the 2021 season. If you missed it already, go back, check out my positional previews. Yes, some of the info has changed now with some of these depth chart updates, but I think a lot of the info in those still stands, so you can check those as well. As you prepare to set your lineup for week number 7, all the best this week. Enjoy this weekend's games. They should be a lot of fun, and I'll talk to you again next week as we recap week 7 and preview week number 8. As always, thanks for watching. Have a good one. Take care. Bye.